Good. All right. Hey, everybody. Welcome to Idaho Dispatch. We are on Facebook Live, and today I am joined by Dr. Joe Jorgensen of the Libertarian Party, presidential candidate. Welcome to Idaho. Smoke.
Thanks for having me. Great to be here.
It's normally not this bad, but the fires all out west have kind of ruined it all for us. So
yes, in fact, people ask me why I'm running for president. I say it's because government is too big, too bossy, too nosy, too intrusive. But the worst part is they often hurt the very people they're trying to help. And forest mismanagement, just one more thing to add to the list of things they can't do right.
Okay. Well, so we've got a couple policy questions.
Sure.
We tried to reach out to voters in Idaho and say, if we could ask Dr. Jorgensen anything, what would that be?
Oh, great.
And so we tried to reach out to the crowd. And so I guess one of the first ones, before we get to the policy questions, would be, you're in Idaho. Mm-hmm. It's a state that has voted Republican since the 60s. Donald Trump, according to the pundits, is expected to win here. You're on the ballot in all 50 states, one of only 3 candidates to be on the ballot in all 50 states. So what brought you to Idaho in the first place when you could have been anywhere else in the country?
Well, we're trying to get to as many voters as possible to let them know they do have a choice. And I would suggest Idaho is a great place to vote for me, especially if you're not happy with what Donald Trump has done. If you're a Republican and you want smaller government, and by the way, I understand why people voted for Donald Trump. He came in as an outsider. He said, look, I'm a businessman. I know how to balance a budget. I know how to cut spending, and I'm going to bring the troops home. I completely understand why people voted for him, but that's not what he delivered. So Trump's going to take Idaho anyway. So what I would say is if you're not happy with what Trump's been doing, vote for me to show that you're not happy with that and to start making changes.
Okay. And so are you traveling to all 50 states? Or
we might get to 46. There are a few states that are closed, Hawaii and New York, for instance. You have to be quarantined. So we're trying to get special permission, but of course, they like the way things are. Democrats and Republicans pretty much have a monopoly out there, so they're trying to keep us out any way they can.
Okay. All right, so let's get to some of the policy questions that I know Idahoans tend to put higher on the priority maybe than some other ones, and then we can kind of go from there. So Second Amendment issues, and this is Idaho, according to Guns and Ammo magazine, is the second most pro-gun state in the country.
I'm glad to hear that.
And I think they have Arizona first. And so with Second Amendment issues, let's take AR-15s, AK-47s, 30-round magazines. There's an effort by some citizens and some politicians to ban those particular items. Where does Dr. Jorgensen stand on banning those particular items?
I actually own an AK-47. The only reason I own it is Bill Clinton back in the 90s said we couldn't have one. And so the first thing I did was I went out and bought one so that it'd be grandfathered in. No, we have a Second Amendment. We need to get rid of every gun law that's been passed in the last 100 years. And we need to prevent these egregious red flag laws that are basically taking away our constitutional rights without a fair trial. And I'd like to point out, Governor Wallace stood in front of the steps at University of Alabama keeping black kids from going in, and the federal government stepped in saying, no, you can't do that. I would do that with gun laws. I would say we do have a Second Amendment, and I'm here to enforce it.
Okay. Well, my next question was about red flag laws, which are a hot topic right now across the country.
I can't think of a worse law than to have your constitutional rights taken away without even a trial.
Okay. And so I've also heard...
Oh, and can I add...
Yes,
by the
absolutely.
way, my degree is in psychology, although it's industrial organizational, but I have had some work in the mental illness field. And even psychiatrists who've been board certified for decades, even they don't know who's going to kill, who's not, who's going to use our gun, who's not. So now we're going to let our nosy neighbors come in and, red flag somebody that even a board certified psychiatrist wouldn't know. So that's just a silly law.
Okay. And I've also heard that you want to abolish the ATF, and rather than taking some third party, I wanted to verify that with you. Is that accurate?
Yes, the only function that I can see that it really would do any good would be having to do with bombs, preventing our government from being bombed. So of course that is a vital function. I don't see why we couldn't move that over to the military and get rid of everything else. Again, the criminals can easily get guns. They can easily get anything else they want. So we certainly don't need to have another alphabet agency doing that for us.
Okay. And now let's move to another big issue here in Idaho, which is the life issue, an abortion. Where does Dr. Jorgensen stand on maybe abortion in general, and then what about late-term abortion?
Well, the Libertarian Party basically says government should stay out of abortion. But I would like to point out that while the Republican Party is pro-life on their platform, that's not the way they've always voted. And in fact, John McCain famously gave the big thumbs down for getting rid of Obamacare, and so Obamacare stuck around. And my heart goes out, for instance, to those nuns who were forced to basically offer what they considered murder as part of their health insurance plan. So where libertarians stand is even the most staunch pro-choice libertarian would never spend one single taxpayer dollar, not even a penny, on abortions, whereas we've seen many Republicans vote and spend money on Planned Parenthood and other things.
Okay, so but as far as late-term abortions, for instance, the Libertarian Party is, no matter what the type of the abortion is, they keep the government out of it?
Yes, and I would like to quote my 1996 running mate who said, if you get the government involved in abortions, the next thing you know, men will be having them, because basically government doesn't work and they usually find a way to mess things up. So I would say that overwhelmingly people are against late-term abortions, and I think that people themselves are doing a pretty good job of staying away from that.
Okay. I know you were asked a little bit on the Nate Shellman show earlier about the lands issue. So this is another hot topic here in the state of Idaho. There's a big debate out west in particular because the federal government does own a lot of the land in Idaho and Wyoming and Utah. And so some citizens want to transfer all that land from the federal government to the state government and have the state government deal with it. Some people are opposed to that idea because they feel like, the state may some rich billionaire who, and then the access to that land is no longer there. So where do you stand on the federal government and control of state lands?
Well, I would suggest that rich millionaires would take much better care of our land than the federal government. I mean, look at what they're doing. All you have to do is look outside at the smoke and see how they've mismanaged the land. But wherever there's a profit motive, there's a reason to take care of the land. And for instance, if you look over in Africa, we hear these heartbreaking stories of tigers and elephants, certain species becoming extinct, and how bad poaching is. And they say, well, government needs to step in. But here's the problem. They are poaching on either government lands or kind of the commons. And so we have tragedy of the commons where there's nobody really taking care of that. Now let's look at private property. When's the last time you heard of a farmer, for instance, who comes back into his wife and says, hey, I had a good haul today. I went out back and I shot all 12 of our cows. You would never do that, because if you own the land, if you own the animals, then you have a profit motive to take care of them and to keep the species going. It's only when you've got, again, tragedy of the commons, where it's like everybody's land and nobody's land, that there's nobody taking care of it.
Okay. All right, so let's jump down a little bit to the issue of marijuana. And I know this is, again, we're in a state that, Idaho is actually one of the few states that doesn't even have, medicinal marijuana that is passed right now.
My state doesn't either, yeah.
Yeah. So if, let's say the federal government repeals the drug laws, at least on marijuana, do you believe that Idaho should still retain its right as a state to determine if that's the route they wanted to go and say, okay, the federal government says you can, but as a state we're saying that you can't? Is that something, or do you believe it should just be legal regardless?
Well, I believe it should be legal regardless. However, I think the federal government steps in on states way too often. And we've got laws right now for alcohol. So sometimes we have Sunday sales, sometimes not, different. Yeah. And I'd like to point out, we used to have different drinking ages for alcohol until Elizabeth Dole stepped in as transportation secretary. And what she did was she took in the money, as federal government always does, they take in the money and then they bribe you with your own money. So what she did was she dangled the highway funds in front of states and said, okay, if you want your money back, you have to raise the drinking age to 21. Now we can have an argument, and maybe 21 is a better drinking age, but it shouldn't be the federal government deciding it. It should be the states. So if Idaho wanted to pass their own marijuana laws, that would be up to them. At least people could leave Idaho if they didn't like them. as opposed to you can't really leave the United States. Just like, unfortunately, people are leaving California for Idaho. So.
Yeah. Okay. Healthcare. Obviously, the cost of healthcare is enormous, and both Republicans and Democrats have tried to come up with solutions on how to fix the healthcare issue, and a lot of people seem to be moving in a direction of just having the federal government or the state governments take over healthcare completely. So what is Dr. Jorgensen's plan for healthcare and bringing the cost of healthcare down potentially?
Oh gosh. The one message I'd like to get across to every voter is that we do not have a free market system, because we hear politicians say, well, the free market doesn't work, so we need single payer. And they come in and they say, we need Medicare for all. Well, when I hear them say Medicare for all, what I think is VA hospital for all. That's a top-down monopoly that doesn't work. Monopolies don't work, and I'm not sure why they want to even try that. So we need to bring competition back in. And in fact, if you look at the only two somewhat free market healthcare fields that we have, which are cosmetic surgery and LASIK surgery, we see prices go down dramatically and quality go up because they have to compete for our dollars. And the state of Indiana instituted a great system where they put healthcare dollars into the pockets of their employees, and they had true insurance. And before the program was instituted, only about 10% of the drugs bought were generic, which is what you'd expect, because you never spend somebody else's money as well as you spend your own, right? Within a short time, 90% of the drugs were generic. And the good thing is they were happy to do it because they got to keep the savings. And that's the way it should be. That if you go out and you buy a car, buy a computer, whatever, groceries, if you shop around, you get a better price, you get to keep the savings. And that's the way it should be.
Okay, so you brought up the VA. Idaho is a very
Do you mind if I get a drink?
Yeah, you're fine. And yeah, I'll talk while you get a drink of water. You brought up the VA. Idaho is a big military state, a very big pro-military state. I'm a disabled veteran myself, so the VA hospital here in Boise is actually one of the better ones in the country. But the VA system in general has been criticized significantly for how our veterans have been treated. And so, what would be your plan to kind of help the veterans and maybe make the system better?
Yeah, to put the dollars into their pockets and tell them, here, it's your money. You go out and you decide where to go.
So they don't have to go to a hospital.
Nope, they don't have to go to a hospital. They could go use alternative medicine. They could go to chiropractors. They could go get massage therapy, whatever they feel is best for them. I mean, these are people who put their lives on the line, and what we're doing is a disgrace. So, again, it's worked very well in the state of Indiana, where it's like, here are the dollars. You go out and look. And that brings up kind of the bigger issue of what's wrong with our healthcare system, is that our insurance is not really insurance at all. And if you look at real insurance, costs are held down because it's only for unexpected costs. So imagine, for instance, like your car insurance. What if your car insurance paid for gas, oil, and car washes? First of all, you wouldn't have any reason to go around and shop for the lowest priced gas, right? Yeah. You just go to your local gas station, maybe the most expensive one that gives you free coffee, because what do you care? You've got your little $5 copay card, right?
Sure.
And because of that, gas stations wouldn't have any reason to compete on price, because they just pass their prices along to the insurance companies. In fact, they could pass the prices along to the insurance companies and you'd never know. Yeah. And that's what we have in healthcare, is that we have no reason to go out and shop around. We couldn't shop around even if we wanted to, because they don't even know the prices. And then there's nobody in the system holding the prices down. And if we go to single payer, it's going to be that much worse.
Okay. All right. So the last question I have, or maybe to allow you to clarify, is a controversy that I'm sure you're familiar with. The Black Lives Matter movement is big across the country right now, and some of those protests have turned into riots, and businesses have burned down a lot. And so I know that you had used the Black Lives Matter hashtag a couple times and said we need to be actively anti-racist. And so a lot of questions did come in, like what exactly did she mean? Does she support BLM, the organization? Right. And so I wanted you to have the opportunity to clarify whatever you want about the BLM issue in particular.
Yes. Well, first of all, somebody on our staff mistakenly put capital letters as in the organization. which that was a typo. That was not supposed to happen. And I did go out and speak with a few leaders. However, they are not associated with the Marxist movement. And of course, the Libertarian Party is the opposite of the Marxist and any Marxism, communism, communistic type systems. So, but we both see the same problems. We see, the racist war on drugs. We see no-knock laws that are killing innocent people. We see qualified immunity, that people aren't being able to go to court. So we see the same problems. Unfortunately, they think the answer is bigger government. My answer is smaller government. And for instance, I was having a talk with one of the local Black Lives Matter people who's not associated with the movement, and he didn't realize until I told him the rest of the story. The Rosa Parks story we all heard about, how Rosa Parks, a heroic Black woman who refused to sit on the back of the bus decades ago. What people don't realize is that was a government-run, government-owned bus. And 60% of the bus ridership were blacks back then. So what if we had a more free market system, today? What would happen if Uber were to discriminate against the best 60% of their customers? They would go out of business, as well they should. But the government can discriminate without any accountability because they can't go out of business. So he hadn't heard that story. And so I said, instead of going to big government, they're the ones who caused the problem. How about let's go to small government? So I'm just hoping to make a dent to show that we agree there's a problem, but the problem is actually government. Okay. And so then when you say that, citizens need to be, so Idaho, for instance, has a long history. Decades ago, we had a contingent of KKK members that were up north. That's all dissipated and gone for the most part. But Idaho has this reputation because we are very white. It's a very white population, right? And so when you say you're
that
up near Canada.
when you say that citizens need to be actively anti-racist, I get what did you mean by that?
Well,
precisely.
Unfortunately, I was being a bit of a psychology lecturer, which that's my job. I teach psychology at Clemson University, and our brains are meant to categorize. That's how we're built. And if I can go to teaching mode for a minute, if I asked you to recite back to me Chicago Bears, daffodils, Green Bay Packers, roses, you would recite back to me Packers and Bears, daffodils and roses, because you categorize them. Our brains automatically categorize whether we like it or not. And so I guess I forgot I wasn't teaching my intro class. And so basically we have to keep our natural tendency to categorize in check, because that's how our brains work.
Sure. Okay. All right. Well, that's all the questions I have. If you would like, it's up to you. The crowd is watching, so if you want to address Idahoans and give them your pitch for why they should vote for you, then you're welcome to do that.
Yes, I would tell you, about 75% of our volunteers are from outside the party, and we keep hearing the same thing, that the old system just isn't working. And again, if you're in Idaho, now if you think Trump is doing a great job, go ahead and vote for him. However, if you're disappointed because he said he was going to reduce the deficit, said he was going to reduce the debt, said that he would bring the troops home and hasn't, I would say that's a wasted vote to vote for Trump. So vote for me to, if nothing more, send a message to Trump to say, you know what, I want what you said you would do for us. And all the things that Trump said that he would do, reducing the deficit, the debt, bringing the troops home, that's what I plan to do.
Okay. All right.
And yes. My website is joe20.com. That's jo20.com if you'd like to check me out.
Awesome. Well, thank you for your time. Again, welcome to Idaho. Sorry, it's much prettier with the mountains normally.
Oh my gosh, it's gorgeous already as it is.
We'll come back sometime when there's mountains that you can actually see. But
I'll do that.
So thank you for your time. We appreciate it, and good luck to you on the campaign.
Well, thanks for doing the real job of a media person, which is to get the word out there about different alternatives. So thank you.
We took some heat because, we're obviously in a very Republican state, and so people said, oh, you're going to help Biden, or you're going to help Trump, and I just said, look, we're all tired of the news and how the news is normally done. So we have a presidential candidate come to Idaho, which never happens. And so why wouldn't we go down and give her the opportunity to voice her opinion?
Well, if you don't mind my adding real quick about hurting the Democrats or Republicans, We tend to draw equally from both crowds, but most of our voters come from independents or people who have never voted.
Okay.
So, and again, Trump's going to get the nomination, or rather, Trump's going to get the electoral votes anyway. So, it's a wasted vote to vote for Trump if that's not who you want. But again, you don't have to agree with us, but the job of the media is to at least show that there's an alternative. So, thanks for doing your job.
No problem. All right. Thank you, Dr. Joe Jorgensen.
Good
Travel
to be
safe.
here.